What happens when two people who already seem to understand each other, without saying much, suddenly arrive in a completely new place together? Sometimes, it is not the grand gestures that capture everyone's attention. Sometimes, it is something much smaller. Staying close, walking side by side, waiting for each other, or simply making sure the other person is never left behind. And that is exactly the kind of moment Jikook fans would be watching closely as Jimin and Jungkook arrive in Texas together. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. If you love Jimin, Jungkook, and those unforgettable moments that make the Jikook fandom pause, smile, and replay everything again, you are in the right place. Welcome to Jikook Verse, the place where we look at the sweetest chemistry, the quietest gestures, and the little moments between Jimin and Jungkook that can turn an ordinary arrival into something that feels incredibly special. Today, we are talking about one simple idea that somehow makes the whole Texas arrival feel much more romantic. Jimin stayed close to Jungkook every step of the way. There was no need for a dramatic declaration, no elaborate speech, no giant romantic gesture. The charm came from something much simpler. They arrived together, and Jimin stayed near him. Imagine the scene. After a long journey, the atmosphere changes the moment they finally reach Texas. The excitement of arriving in a new city mixes with the exhaustion that comes after traveling. There are people around, cameras waiting, movement everywhere, and countless things demanding their attention. Yet in the middle of all that noise, Jimin keeps finding his way back to Jungkook. That is the kind of detail that makes a moment memorable. Because when you are surrounded by hundreds of distractions, the person you naturally look for says a lot. Jungkook moves forward, and Jimin is there. Jungkook slows down, and Jimin stays close. There is no rushing ahead just to disappear into the crowd. There is no sense that they are moving in completely separate directions. Instead, there is an almost effortless rhythm between them. Step by step, side by side, together. And honestly, that is what makes the moment feel so warm. Jimin has always had a way of making small gestures feel meaningful. He does not necessarily need to make a huge scene to show that someone matters to him. Sometimes, his presence itself becomes the gesture. In this imagined Texas arrival, that presence becomes impossible to ignore. Jungkook does not have to turn around every few seconds to see whether Jimin is there. He already knows. And Jimin does not have to announce that he wants to stay beside Jungkook. He simply does. That kind of quiet understanding is exactly what makes Jikook moments so fascinating for fans. It is not about trying to prove something to the world. It is about the comfort of two people who know each other's pace. Think about traveling with someone you are comfortable with. After hours on a plane, through airports, schedules, security checks, and endless movement, you naturally gravitate toward the person who makes the entire experience feel easier. You do not have to talk constantly. You do not have to entertain each other every second. Sometimes, simply having that person beside you is enough, and that is the energy surrounding this Texas arrival. The city itself feels almost like a new chapter. Texas brings a completely different atmosphere. The wide roads, bright lights, warm air, and huge American landscape create a setting that feels bigger than life. For Jimin and Jungkook, arriving there together creates an interesting contrast. The surroundings are massive. The moment between them is simple. Jimin staying close to Jungkook becomes the little detail that makes the entire arrival feel personal. For fans watching from a distance, it is easy to imagine the tiny interactions that could happen between them. Maybe Jungkook looks around to take in the new surroundings. Maybe Jimin notices something first and quietly points it out. Maybe one of them says something that makes the other laugh. Maybe they exchange one of those quick looks that lasts only a second but somehow says more than a full conversation. Those are the moments fans love. Not because they are necessarily dramatic, but because they feel natural. And perhaps that is why the idea of Jimin never leaving Jungkook's side becomes so powerful. Romance does not always look like a movie scene. Sometimes romance is simply remembering to wait. Sometimes it is walking at the same speed. Sometimes it is noticing when the other person is tired. Sometimes it is making sure they are not alone in an unfamiliar place. And sometimes it is just choosing the same direction. For Jimin and Jungkook, that shared direction becomes the heart of this Texas moment. There is something particularly sweet about arriving somewhere new with someone who already feels familiar. A new city can be overwhelming. New streets, new schedules, new surroundings, new expectations. But when the person beside you is someone you trust, the unfamiliar suddenly becomes easier. You can imagine Jimin looking at Jungkook with that comfortable expression, almost as if saying without words, "I'm right here." And Jungkook does not need to ask where Jimin is. He knows. That is the beauty of their connection in this imagined scene. It is not loud. It does not need to be loud. The quietness is what makes it romantic. Fans often become attached to the little things because those details create the strongest emotional reactions. A glance, a smile, a shoulder brushing another shoulder while walking, one person waiting for the other, a quick turn of the head, a moment of laughter after a long day. None of those things would necessarily make international headlines on their own, but put them together, and suddenly there is an atmosphere. And that atmosphere is exactly what makes the Texas arrival feel special. Jimin staying close to Jungkook does not have to mean that anything dramatic is happening. It can simply mean that they are comfortable together. It can mean that after everything they have experienced together, being side by side feels completely natural. And for Jikook fans, natural moments are often the ones that hit the hardest. Because there is something incredibly beautiful about seeing two people who do not need to force their chemistry. They just have it. The Texas setting also adds another layer to the moment. Imagine the two of them stepping into the warm Texas air after traveling. The atmosphere is different from what they are used to. The city feels energetic, the environment feels unfamiliar, and there is an unmistakable sense that something new is beginning. Yet Jimin remains close. Jungkook continues forward, and somehow their movements fall into the same rhythm. It almost feels like the location changed, but their dynamic did not. That is what makes the moment so comforting. No matter where they go, the connection remains familiar. A new country does not change the way they interact. A new city does not change the way they find each other in a crowd. Texas can be huge, but Jimin still knows exactly where he wants to be, beside Jungkook. There is also something romantic about the idea of traveling together after a demanding schedule. When people spend so much time performing, working, meeting expectations, and living under constant attention, quiet companionship can become incredibly valuable. You do not always need another conversation. Sometimes you just need someone who understands when you want silence, someone who knows when you are tired, someone who can make you laugh when the day feels exhausting, someone who can walk beside you without making you feel like you have to perform. That is the emotional core of this imagined arrival. Jimin is not trying to steal the spotlight from Jungkook. Jungkook is not trying to steal the spotlight from Jimin. Instead, the spotlight naturally finds them because their chemistry creates its own atmosphere. And maybe that is why the phrase, "every step of the way," feels so fitting. It is not about one single moment. It is about consistency. One step, then another, until suddenly, fans realize that Jimin has been beside Jungkook the entire time. There is something deeply comforting about that kind of companionship. The world around them can be chaotic. Their schedules can be unpredictable. Their lives can move at an incredible speed. But in this little moment, everything feels slower. Two people arrive in Texas. They walk together. They stay close. And for a few minutes, nothing else seems more important. For young fans watching, that is perhaps the most relatable part of the entire moment. Because everyone understands what it feels like to have that one person you naturally look for. The person you want beside you when you enter a new room. The person you want to share a joke with. The person you want to tell when something funny happens. The person whose presence makes an unfamiliar place feel familiar. That is why this kind of Jikook moment can hit emotionally. It takes something ordinary and gives it meaning. Arriving in Texas is just travel. But arriving in Texas together, staying close, matching each other's pace, and quietly making sure the other person is there turns that travel moment into something fans can remember. And perhaps the sweetest part is that nothing needs to be exaggerated. There is no need to create a dramatic scene. There is no need for a grand declaration. Jimin staying beside Jungkook already creates the feeling. Sometimes the strongest moments are the ones where nobody says anything. The silence does the talking. The proximity does the talking. The little smiles do the talking. The shared journey does the talking. And if there is one image that captures the entire mood, it is simple. Jimin and Jungkook walking through Texas together, close enough that neither one feels alone. That is the kind of image that stays in your mind. Not because it is complicated, because it is simple. Because sometimes the most romantic thing someone can do is simply stay. Stay when the journey gets tiring. Stay when the surroundings become overwhelming. Stay when there are 1,000 other things competing for attention. Stay because being beside that person feels natural. And in this Texas arrival, that is exactly what makes Jimin's presence beside Jungkook feel so warm. The city may be unfamiliar. The schedule may be busy. The cameras may be everywhere. But their little world remains remarkably simple. Jimin is there. Jungkook is there. And they keep moving forward together. Maybe that is why this imagined Texas moment feels less like an arrival and more like the beginning of another beautiful chapter. Because wherever the road leads next, the most memorable part is not necessarily the destination. It is who walks beside you. And for this moment, that person is right there. Jimin beside Jungkook. Jungkook beside Jimin, step after step, until Texas becomes more than just another stop on the journey. It becomes the backdrop for a moment that feels soft, intimate, and unforgettable. For Jikook fans, that is the kind of chemistry that can turn a simple arrival into an emotional highlight. Not because they needed to prove anything, but because sometimes staying close says enough. And perhaps that is the sweetest message hidden inside this entire Texas moment. No matter how big the city is, no matter how busy the world becomes, there is something beautiful about having someone beside you who makes the journey feel a little easier. So as Jimin and Jungkook move through Texas together, the image that remains is not one of noise or spectacle. It is two familiar figures moving at the same pace, one never too far from the other. A quiet smile, a shared glance, a few steps forward. And the feeling that, at least in that moment, neither one has to walk alone. That is what makes their Texas arrival so memorable. Sometimes the most beautiful moments are not the ones that demand attention. They are the ones that quietly stay with you long after everything else has disappeared. And this is one of those moments. Thank you for spending this time with us here at Jikook Verse. If this moment made you smile, stay connected with us for more Jimin and Jungkook moments, the chemistry fans love, and the little details that make every journey feel a little more special. Until the next Jikook moment, keep watching, keep smiling, and keep the beautiful energy alive.